Welcome to the Oasis Podcast. We invite you to visit us at oasisla.org to find out more information on our services, resources, and how to support this ministry. We'd also like to invite you to one of our 5 Sunday services, 8:30, 10:30, 12:30, 2:30, and 6:30 p.m. We hope you enjoy today's message.
You know, everything that is made and everything that's built has a list of ingredients. In fact, if you wanted to make concrete, and I'm sure there are many of you who are wondering just how you make concrete, I'm going to tell you. There are some ingredients that you would need. You need cement and sand and stone or gravel and the proper amount of water. And each one of those ingredients is needed. If you had the sand and cement and gravel, but you didn't have the water, then it wouldn't hold together. And if you didn't use the gravel, then it wouldn't be strong enough. Everything that you make has ingredients, and every ingredient matters. Now, probably my most favorite dessert of all time is something called chocolate sheet cake. It is just delicious. You'll have to take my word for it. And, my mom can make it like nobody's business. It's awesome. And if you wanted to make it, here are the ingredients. Butter and water and cocoa powder and flour and sugar and salt and eggs and sour cream and baking soda and milk and confectioner's sugar and vanilla extract and walnuts. Doesn't that just sound good? Thinking about it. Well, one time as a young person, I thought I would make it. I mean, how hard can it be? And so I had the list of ingredients, and what I realized I was missing was salt. And then I looked on the recipe, and I'm like, oh, come on, it's just like a little bit of salt. And why does a dessert need salt anyway? You know, desserts are sweet, so I just made it without the salt. And then I took a taste of my cake without the salt. Evidently, salt is needed. Every ingredient matters. And I think there are ingredients in a healthy marriage, and every ingredient matters. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, those ingredients. And Proverbs 24 says this, through skillful and godly wisdom is a house, a life, a home, and a family built. And by understanding it's established on a sound and good foundation. And by knowledge shall its chambers of every area be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Wisdom. And Proverbs 5 verse 1, this is explaining that wisdom. It says, my son, be attentive to wisdom, which is godly wisdom learned from actual and costly experience. That's the wisdom that we're talking about. So in this series, we're doing our best to communicate wisdom, the wisdom that's learned by actual and costly experience. Now, some of it's wisdom that we've learned, and that's cost us, and some of it we've learned by the costly experience of other people, by seminars or books or whatever. But this is the wisdom that can build your life, your home, your family. And really, that's at the heart of any message that comes from this platform, is that we hope to impart wisdom that actually will help build your life, so that it's not a word that stays within these walls, but it's a word that you can apply to your life in some form or fashion. Perhaps not the whole message might apply to you, but there will be something that you can pull out and apply it into your life today. So in talking about ingredients in a great relationship, ingredients in a great marriage, the first one I will talk about is real love. John 13, verse 34, this is Jesus talking, and he says, a new command I give you, love one another. He says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. Okay, he's saying that we're to love one another, not how we might have experienced love in our past, or not how we may have loved before, but we're to love by the standard that Jesus set in loving us. And it really has very little to do with how you feel. Love isn't what you feel, love is what you do, oftentimes in spite of what you're feeling. Love is a verb. And we all might define love differently. But here in this verse, as Jesus is talking about how we're to love each other, he's not talking about this pink heart, fluffy little kind of love. No, the love he's talking about is less like the romance of Romeo and Juliet and more like Oscar Schindler in Schindler's List as he laid down his life to see people rescued. Jesus is saying we're to love like that. Now, the word that's translated for love in these verses is the word agape. And that is also the same word that's used in describing how God loved us. You know, John 3:16, which would be one of certainly the most well-known scriptures around the planet. You've seen it held up at every sporting event ever, played. It says, for God so loved the world that he sent his son. For God so agape the world that he sent his son. His love for us, God's love for us was fierce. It was intense. It was overwhelming. It was consuming. And that's the kind of love that he's saying, now I want you to love one another with. And then, Jesus, he just has to push it a little bit. Because he says, we're not only to love each other, but he's actually saying in another verse, which I'll read, he says we're supposed to agape, that same kind of fierce, consuming love. We're supposed to agape love our enemies. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is talking and he says, you've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So, no matter what your spouse might feel like at the moment, friend or enemy, you're to love them with the same kind of lay your life down kind of love. All right, so what does this kind of love look like anyway? Well, Jesus said it in Matthew chapter 5. And then the Apostle Paul, throughout all of his letters, basically he describes the outworking of that love. And in Philippians 2, he talks about this kind of love. And he says, this kind of love, he says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. So that's a way that we're supposed to love, is to consider others better than ourselves. But rather than us just looking at those others out there, let's consider our spouse as better than ourselves. Let's make them more important. I'd rather those other people be more important. No, I'm just saying let's just bring it right to home here. Let's make them more important. In a marriage, how about treating your spouse as more important than you are? Have you ever been any place? You probably have. So why don't you think about a situation where you've been where you are not the most important person in the room? How many of you have ever been to a wedding? Okay, come on, watching on video, online, have you ever been to a wedding? Well, most of us have. And if you were not the bride, you were not the most important person in that room. Or maybe you've been to a dinner where somebody's being, honored. You're not the most important person in the room, or different situations at your company, perhaps. We've all been in those situations. So how do you act when you're with someone who's more important than you? Well, you probably don't interrupt them. You probably laugh at their jokes even when they're not funny. You probably defer to them. You treat them as if they're the most important person in the room. And I'm just saying, what if we did that to the person we were married to? I mean, that could just change the whole relationship right there. Think about this in terms of your family, the family that you grew up in. What if your father had treated your mother like she was the most important person? Don't you think that might have changed the family dynamics just a bit? Or what if your mother treated your father that way? Would it have made a difference? Well, that's what Jesus did for us. He considered us more important than himself, so he laid down his life for us. Well, Paul goes on to describe this kind of love, and in verse 4 in Philippians chapter 2, he says, each one of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Now, the truth is, I'm interested in what interests me. I am not interested in what doesn't interest me, because it doesn't interest me. If it interested me, I would be interested in it, so it's hard to show interest in something that doesn't interest me. But if we're going to love like Jesus said to love, then we're supposed to express an interest in the interest of our spouse. So I think we should proactively do it rather than just tolerate it. Now for me, this became baseball. If you've attended at least 2 services here at the Oasis, then you know that Philip is a serious Yankee fan. And it's a definite interest. So for years, I have given him all sorts of Yankee stuff. Caps and jackets and bobbleheads and posters, et cetera, et cetera. And as a surprise one year for his birthday, I cashed in some of my frequent flyer points and I flew him and our son Jordan to New York to see a game. But actually what he likes best? is when I express a personal interest, that I demonstrate it. I just don't pat him on the head and say, you just go on, honey, and enjoy that game. No, I express interest. I know that Andy Pettit is on the DL and he better get back because we need him in the playoffs. I know that Mariano is the best closer in the game, despite what happened last night, and that A.J. Burnett better find his zone. And I screamed just as loud as Philip. That's a lie. I screamed a lot louder than Philip when Derek Jeter broke Lou Gehrig's record of all-time hits, and again when A-Rod hit 600 home runs. And I know that right now the Yankees are half a game ahead of Tampa Bay. They're in first place, but barely. But the good news is they're 9 games ahead of Boston, so we're happy about that. So I have made a decision to share in his interest in the Yankees. Now, Philip is obviously interested in ministry, and so am I, so that's an easy thing to share. But he's interested in a whole bunch of other stuff. Like he's interested in horses, and while I certainly appreciate horses, and I like them, and all of that, I am not really as thrilled with the whole horse life as he is, so I'm only mildly interested there. And he's also interested in all things presidential. Like he knows so much trivia about presidential stuff, and I appreciate his brain, but I'm not going to memorize all the presidential facts. So it's not like I have to be interested in everything that he's interested in, just some. So real love is what we're talking about now. Real love is caring about their interests. Do you even know what they are? What is the thing in their life that if you expressed interest in it, not only would it shock them, but it would really bless them? And then it's even more than just the external interest, but also the interest of the soul. You know, what makes them feel peaceful? What brings them joy? What makes them laugh? What makes them feel comfort? And all of this might sound really hard, but if you want to have a marriage that 30 years from now still has that something, that spark, then these are the things you have to do. See, a marriage is not a roommate situation where you just divvy up the chores and then each of you go do your own thing. No, this is a covenant relationship where we each see each other as more important, where we're interested in what interests the other. Ephesians 5, Paul says to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Mutual submission, putting one another first. And in Romans 12, he says, be good friends who love deeply. Practice playing second fiddle. You know, giving the other preference. Practice playing second fiddle. We have to practice because it doesn't come easy. Nobody wants to play second fiddle. We all want to be first fiddle. We have to practice deferring to somebody else. We have to practice when, what would you like to do? No. What would you like to do? No. What would you like to do? You have to practice that stuff. And we have to practice it all the time just like everybody else does. And for us, it's usually one of the things is the temperature in the house. Because I'm forever opening windows and he's forever closing them. I'm opening them, he's closing them. Only now this week, I know I'm going to have to practice playing second fiddle. I'm going to open it and then I'm going to have to go, no, but I'll close it. But then maybe he'll practice playing second fiddle. He'll go, no, open it. I'll go, oh, no, I'll close it. And then we'll fight over who's playing second fiddle. I don't know. Anyway, that's where my mind goes sometimes. You know, I found that there are times when, in a relationship, when you can win an argument, and this is true in any relationship, you can win an argument, but undermine the relationship. You know, Philip and I have had just a few arguments in our almost 26 years of marriage, and there have been a few times when I have won, when I made my point, and it was the best one, too. And then afterwards, I realized that by saying what I did to win the argument, I actually drove a wedge between us. And I realized that in those moments, I wasn't looking after his interests, but rather my own. So the first ingredient is real love. And the second ingredient is healthy interdependence. Matthew 19 says this. This is Jesus talking, and he said, haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they're no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate. Now, sometimes when people think of two becoming one, maybe they picture that ceremony that some of us have seen at weddings, you know, the unity candle thing, where she's got her candle and he's got his candle, and then the two light the one in the middle, and their lights are put out just for the one in the middle. Awesome. And then, or some people could picture it like this, you know, she's the red, he's the blue, and, you know, the two become one. So as they do, they create a whole other color, right? So a whole different thing. The red is no longer there. The blue is no longer there. It's now just a whole different color. And that's romantic. And I'm just not sure I see it that way, actually. I think I see it more like this. I think it's more like this rope. Like she's the blue one, and he's the green one, perhaps. And as they are intertwined together, they're still very visible. Nobody's disappeared. They're just very visible. But the thing is, two are stronger. Ecclesiastes 4 says two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. So as they're intertwined, each one is still visible, but together they make a much stronger cord. See, it takes two eyes to form a we. The eyes don't just disappear or melt into the we. They still exist. But something new has been added, which is the union itself. See, the union is intended to focus on the needs of the individual and the needs of the relationship. But the focus oftentimes will shift and change just depending on the season of the relationship. There is built-in tension and sacrifice in being part of a we. You know, for example, a husband might give up a promotion in another city so he can keep the family where they're doing well. Or a wife might put off going back to school because of, you know, her husband's work hours. Those are the kind of decisions we make in order to keep the we strong. And the I is also important. See, the couple that supports the growth and interests of the individuals will bring strength to the marriage. The relationship is better and more whole when the individuals are stronger and more whole. A number of years ago, I started to get frustrated at a weakness I saw in myself. I realized that I was great at starting things. I could start anything. I just wasn't that great at finishing it. And so I had a lot of unfinished things around. And being weak in this area actually affected how I saw myself. And so I knew I needed to start something and finish it. And it actually needed to be something significant, something other than just, you know, finishing a triple scoop ice cream cone. And at this particular time in my life, I was taking my son Jordan to karate class. And so as I'm watching the karate class, I began to think, I could do that. And then plus I noticed that at every level that a student passed, then a new color of belt was given all the way to black belt. And it was kind of like a prize, and I like prizes. And I'm thinking, perfect, so I'm going to take karate. So I did. So I signed up for karate. And I'm not sure that was the easiest of goals, perhaps, but that's what I did. So the first day, we show up to class, or I showed up to class in my, you know, my stiff little uniform, my stiff little belt, and I was so excited because I had just seen that movie Karate Kid, like the old one, because I'm an old person, old one. And you know, the move at the end where he's like hanging on all bloody like this, and then all those just amazing moves they did in that movie. And I'm so excited because I just know within hours, I'm going to be impressing my friends and family with all sorts of amazing karate moves. So I'm so excited. But you know, we didn't learn anything like that the first day. We didn't learn any of those fun moves the first day or the 10th or the 30th. You know what we learned how to do for weeks? Fall. We learned how to fall to the front and fall to the back and fall to the side, fall, get up, fall, get up, fall, get up. I spent hours learning how to fall. And to be completely honest, I wanted to quit now because I wasn't in the brochure. Hey. And the wanting to quit, the quitting had been my pattern for years. As soon as a project got a little boring or got a little mundane, I would quit. Feeling justified because, hey, why should I have to put up with boring? And then I would go look for something more exciting. Well, here's a tip for free. Sometimes life, sometimes work, sometimes marriage is boring. It becomes routine. And since we're grown-ups, the decisions we make during those times actually say a lot about our character. And see, previously, the decisions I made during the boring parts of projects revealed that I was a quitter. But this time, I didn't quit. I just kept the goal of that black belt in front of me. And then a few years into my karate adventure, well, my son decided he wanted to devote his time to basketball. He was no longer going to take karate. So now it's just me going to class, which became inconvenient kind of for all of us in managing schedules. So now I had to deal with an inconvenience. And usually when things got inconvenient, that was another time I would quit. But I didn't. I kept going. And 3 years into my study of karate, it began to get really